All right, so I want to welcome everybody to this NFIB meeting with Congressman John Curtis. I'm Jake Bronger, the Grassroots Manager. We have the State Director Candace DeLeon and Kevin Kuhlman from our Federal Government Relations team. To start this call, and I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody, just so we don't have anyone talking over each other. So Congressman and Candace and Kevin will have to unmute yourselves when you get started here. But this way we won't have anyone talking over. If you do have any questions, there is a comment section if you are streaming this where you can ask the questions. And you can also, of course, email us. And if we do have additional time and the group is kind of manageable enough, we might be able to come off, unmute and ask some questions as well. But with that, I'll turn it over to our State Director, Candace DeLeon.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Perfect. Well, I want to introduce Congressman Curtis. I have known him for quite a while, and I just love the fact that he is so small business friendly. But I want to give you some little tips and hints about him. He represents Utah's 3rd Congressional District, which includes Salt Lake County, Utah County, Emery, Carbon, San Juan, Grand, Wasatch counties. A lot of those are very urban, and some of them are super rural. So he has a broad base to cover. He and his wife have 6 children and 8 grandchildren. One of those must be fairly new because the last write-up I have for you said 7. So you'll have to tell us about that in a bit. Congressman Curtis is always approachable. He has been so approachable from day one. He always has an open door policy. He listens, he calls. He's had town halls ad nauseum in the district. No one can say he has not tried to reach out and contact his constituency. When he was mayor of Provo, Provo was #1 in pretty much everything they did in the state and the nation. And now as a government official, he's been the top elected official voted by social media, by the government social media group. The other nice thing that I love about him is that he hit the ground running when he hit Washington, D.C. As an elected official. Since he's been there, when he was elected in November of 2017, he's passed 7 bills into law and sponsored 30. He's co-sponsored 269 bills, and he's held more than 177 town halls and covered 25,000 miles and this is my favorite part, his favorite socks. No one has as many socks as Congressman Curtis. And I'm going to turn the time over to you now, Congressman Curtis, to introduce yourself with what you've done and what you'd like my small business members to know.
Well, thank you, Candace and Jake and Kevin. It's just really nice. And I know that I was a little bit difficult on the timing of this, and I apologize to anybody that I inconvenienced, but we were notified just earlier this week that we'd be called back to Washington, D.C., and that threw everything up in disarray. And I just arrived about an hour ago back in Salt Lake City from our D.C. trip. And of course, the big reason to go back was to vote for the additional money for the PPP program for our small businesses. And I know I speak for my colleagues that really to a person, we just really felt this was important. And for me personally, it was the most important part of the whole stimulus bill, of the larger bill and the second bill that we passed. And I just think it says a lot that Congress has paid so much attention to small businesses and tried to alleviate as much pain as possible. I was a small business owner before I was mayor. My father was a small business owner. My grandfather was a small business owner. I have 2 daughters with small businesses. It's just really in our DNA, and it makes it very easy for me, I think, to relate to all of you, and I'm so grateful. In my testimony before the Small Business Committee yesterday, one of the things I said that I feel really strongly about was that it won't be government that pulls us out of this funk that we're in right now. It'll be small businesses. And I want you to know I really believe that. Now, a little bit off topic, you mentioned 8 grandchildren. And after this, I'm going to go see my 8th that was born while I was in Washington, D.C. With all COVID and everything going on, I couldn't actually, even if I'd been here, I couldn't go see them, and they're now home from the hospital. So a little later this afternoon, I'll go see my 8th grandchild. We have 7 girls and 1 boy. And that poor boy, he's the oldest, and then 7 girls. So I'd just love to answer your questions. And most importantly, just know this is at least one congressman that knows how important you are to our economy, that knows how difficult it is sometimes to keep the lights on and make payroll, and just very grateful for all that you all do.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. I have one question I want to start off for you. With the passage of that legislation, what do you think the most important parts of that legislation were, and why were you so invested in making sure that passed?
Clearly, the very most important was the additional funding for PPP. And well, I'm the first to know that the program is not perfect, that it leaves some of our businesses out, but it picks up such a wide swath of businesses and is such an important part of our recovery. And the fact that we ran out of money so quickly shows just how important the program is. So for me, and I really believe for my colleagues, the central piece of that legislation was the additional funding for small businesses, for the loans that in many cases will be just a grant. And really happy that that passed, and passed with, there were a few that voted against it, but that always happens in a near unanimous fashion.
Okay. I've actually had some phone calls and some emails from some of my small businesses. They were really concerned when the first money ran out so quickly, and they found out that some of that money had been given to uber large businesses and some publicly traded businesses. What kind of assurance can I give them that this second round of money is going to reach them, the truly small businesses?
Well, what's really difficult is to somehow draw a line about who qualifies for this and who doesn't. And no matter where we draw that line, there's going to be some people on the wrong side of that line on both sides. And especially when Congress had to move so quickly, we could have done it better and taken months and months to do it, but that would have been the wrong decision. So I'm very well aware of some of the things that you're alluding to that are problems. I think Congress's commitment is to keep funding this until we get the money to where it needs to be and to the people that need to have it. In this particular bill, there was, and I'm going a little bit from memory here, but I think it was about $60 billion that was specifically set aside for community banks and smaller institutions. Now, you can't guarantee that that money won't go to anybody that it shouldn't, but has a much higher likelihood of getting to the right people. I think there's also, you've seen quite a bit of social pressure on some of these corporations that took the money that it wasn't really intended for. And I've heard some stories about that social pressure mounting to the point where they're actually giving the money back. And I think there's a strong sense of who this is really belonging to, this money, and what it's really for. And hopefully we'll continue to get the money all the way to the end of the rows where it's really needed the most.
One of the additional concerns for the PPP is that, and I've heard this from several different aspects, and I have been on some conference calls with Howard Headley, our Utah Bankers Association president, and Scott Simpson, the head of the Utah's credit unions. But some of the small businesses are feeling like that maybe they reshuffled the deck and they're taking all new applications, and whether you were in the queue or not, you might not stay in that queue. And some people are already being told that they are not going to qualify for the money the second time and didn't the first time, but were never given exact answers. How do we help them navigate that system? Well,
I think the very most important thing, and boy, this is just really jumping out in importance. If you don't have a good, strong relationship with your bank, I think everybody can see how important that is. And if your bank has let you down a little bit through this process, I'm not suggesting that you would switch banks, but you really need to have that deep heart-to-heart with them, that really when we needed you the most, you weren't there for us. And I've heard stories about that, and that really concerns me. We made a decision, and I actually think it was a good decision, but it does have consequences, and that is to allow all financial institutions to make these loans instead of just the SBAs. You can imagine if just the businesses, just the financial institutions that did SBA loans were the only way you could access this, there's no way the system could handle that. So really the only option was to say, we're going to open this up to all financial institutions. Well, that means you're going to have good and bad, right? And people who are better at it than others. But opening up the funnel that wide was a really important part of getting vast amounts of money and vast amounts of loans out. But I've heard stories about the quality varying, dramatically between these financial institutions. And so I think the most important thing your members can do is sit down with these financial institutions very quickly, let them know how dependent they are on their help, and that they've got to get them through this process. They've got to streamline them and get back in queue and get this money down to where it belongs.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I have another question that I've been getting from several others, and that is that as we open the economy back up, as we take this switch that was immediately switched off and dial it back up like a dimmer switch, how are we, who do we get our marching orders from? Some of the businesses aren't quite clear as to how they can open up and what they can do and what they can't do. Can you give us some advice on that?
Yeah, don't quote me, but I'm going to give you some advice. You control your destiny, not the governor, not the president, not your congressman. You take ownership in this decision. Now follow the guidance, right? Don't just throw away the guidance coming from our governor. But I would really encourage your members to own this themselves, to find ways to keep their businesses essential, to find ways to keep their businesses safe to their customers, and to be aggressive about opening up within the guidelines. And so if that means that you've got to put tape on the floor to keep your customers apart, put tape on the floor, right? I mean, do whatever it takes to meet these guidelines and get the doors open. Realizing that you could open your doors tomorrow and the people may not be ready to come in, but if you don't open them, it's going to take that much longer. And so if I owned a business right now, I would be really aggressive myself in making those decisions and owning those decisions myself. The governor has been, I think he's done one of the things that I really admire, and he's really kept to suggestions, not mandates. Does that make sense? And I really think that's the right approach for our state. Your business owners, they know their limitations. They don't want their customers to get sick. They can make good decisions. And I really do believe that they'll make good decisions in keeping people safe and at the same time figuring out ways to open their doors.
Thank you for those words of encouragement. I was just on a conference call earlier today where I had to discuss and talk about the precautions that small businesses may need to take as they open their doors back up, and Governor Herbert has been very good at making sure these are suggestions in Utah and not mandates. What do you think in your 3rd congressional district? You have such a diverse population in that district, with Salt Lake and Utah County being so highly populated and the rural areas spread out. What do you think the kind of advice is that they need to hear with regards to staying safe and staying healthy?
You make a great point. I talked to a county commissioner in San Juan the other day, and I said, well, are you staying safe? And he laughed and he said, "I'm on my tractor 5 miles away from another human being." He has a very different set of worries, right, than somebody in Salt Lake or Utah County. And that's why a one size fits all from Washington, D.C., or even from the state of Utah just doesn't work. Why people need to make these individual decisions. And my advice along these lines is be creative, figure out how to keep your doors open and keep people safe at the same time. And I really do believe, with very, very few exceptions, those two things are compatible: keeping customers safe and keeping the doors open. And the reason that your small businesses are successful to begin with is because of your ingenuity, your creativity, and your ability to figure out difficult situations. And I really believe that if we let our business owners do this, that they'll do it well and do it safely.
So, Congressman, do you see other pieces of legislation coming down the pipeline in Washington, D.C. that will be able to help my small businesses here in the state of Utah?
I do. In some of our calls with the president, the vice president, and those who advise them, I've heard a lot of discussions about looking for regulatory relief. We've tried to do what we can to get money into their hands, but there's a lot we can do too to smooth the path. So I think you'll see efforts by the Trump administration to find those regulations that have been burdensome and holding them back, and be more aggressive on relieving those. I think the Trump administration has done probably better than any other presidency in removing regulations. I think you're going to see them go at even a more rapid clip. There's also talk about additional tax relief. The president is very aggressive about looking for even more than the 27 tax reform, in giving businesses a break on taxes, knowing that that's one way that he can help them as well.
Perfect. Kevin, I think you had a couple questions you wanted to ask the congressman.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you, Congressman. First, I'd like to recognize your team, and specifically Jake, for doing a great job on outreach and trying to get some flexibility on some of the limitations that maybe SBA has put on the Paycheck Protection Program loans, recognizing that SBA had a monumental task of putting out what was originally $349 billion is now $310 billion in a very short period of time. They did put some limitations on in their interim final rules that perhaps were a little bit overly restrictive. For example, we realized that the goal of the program is to maintain payroll, but for many businesses without a lot of employees, but maybe higher overhead costs, this happens in many seasonal businesses. I'm thinking of some of the Utah ski areas that they may not have that full payroll at this time, and therefore that 75% payroll, 25% other expenses may be overly restrictive. So working with him on a letter to the administrator to try to loosen that flexibility a little bit. I guess my question to you about that is, as you think, there are certain things maybe the administrator could do, but what is the best way that NFIB members and NFIB can get ideas for, as you consider additional phases for perhaps legislative tweaks in addition to the additional funding that you said may be necessary?
Yeah, I think you were quick to compliment Jake, and we appreciate that. That's very kind of you, but we would be just as gracious in our appreciation for you. And those of the people listening really need to know how key it is for you to be funneling your advice through Candace, up to Kevin, so that it can come into our office and you can tell us how to help you. The biggest way we've helped you is actually just doing what you've asked us to do, right? It hasn't been our ideas. So I'd say that's really important. The other thing I would say is you are a wealth, you meaning your membership is a wealth of good ideas. Leading up to the $2.2 trillion, I spent like sun up to sundown calling businesses and asking them for ideas. And it was amazing the ideas they had, many of which didn't include dollars from the government. It was like helping us with our banks, taking some pressure off banks, letting them reorganize loans. Those types of ideas are really valuable because it doesn't cost money, but it helps them. We actually just put in a bill a couple of days ago. It mirrors the opportunity zones. And what it does is it says, look, just like we gave tax relief if people took investments and put them into opportunity zones, our bill does the same thing if they have high capital gains and they want to plow that back into small businesses. It gives them relief from taxes, not paying taxes on that for a period of time. That came from a business owner. That idea to put that bill in was a business owner that I talked to. And so as you have these ideas, please funnel them up and make sure they're getting to us. And I can tell you, at least our office is very interested in turning those into actual legislation. And some of our best ideas will come from people on the street who are actually living this and seeing how we can impact them in a positive way.
Appreciate that, Congressman. I also think that hot off the email presses, I guess, if you will, after the call started at 3:50 p.m., I received a joint press statement from SBA Administrator Carranza and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. And just to update members who may be applying for that second round of PPP funds, the Small Business Administration will resume accepting PPP loan applications on Monday, April 27th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time from approved lenders on behalf of any eligible borrower. This will ensure that SBA has properly coded the system, can account for changes made by the legislation. But understanding and recognizing that the funds ran out just over a week ago on Thursday, April 16th, and we do have some who are either in the queue or perhaps their lender. In fact, we have one person in the comment, Jim Harrison in the comments suggests that his lender says, they don't think he's even going to be eligible for the next round, despite him getting his application in early. Any advice to small business owners who perhaps either find themselves in limbo or still are not getting the best news from their lenders?
Yeah, so I do. If first of all, find out if what they're telling you is legitimate. If you had a serious illness, you would be advised to get a second opinion. Don't be afraid to get a second opinion on this. The banks are doing the best they can, but this is all new to them, and they could make mistakes. So get a second opinion, and then be aggressive. I would go into that bank and I wouldn't leave, right? Like I would sit down there and I wouldn't leave, right, until your forms were in the system and realize that the squeaky wheel is going to get the grease. They're trying to deal with more people than they have bandwidth to deal with. And so A, get a second opinion, B, just be aggressive with them. And as far as really just keep after them until you feel like you have their attention.
So I have one more question that just popped into my head based on some of the comments in the chat. I have several small businesses that are in the medical field. So I have some that are new podiatrists, some that are new physical therapists, some that are new audiologists. Just recently out of school, a young practice, and 2 of the 3 have not been able to acquire or get loans or PPP, and they have small offices, only 1 or 2 employees. Oftentimes it's their spouse that helps them in their office when they're first getting started. And they still have loans, school loans that they have to pay. And they're really struggling with this. What's some advice you could give them?
I think it's the same advice that I'd really give any small business, even outside the parameters of this pandemic. And that is really stick to those things that have made you successful and will make you successful. And that is ingenuity, figuring it out. I just know, so many of the small businesses, sometimes they don't even know how they're going to make payroll in a week, and they figure it out, right? And that's why I have confidence that small businesses will pull through this, is your resiliency and your ability to navigate difficult things. We truly are trying to do the best from Washington, D.C., and the governor's trying to do the best from from the state capitol. But at the end of the day, your success or failure, we can't take credit for, and you will be the ones who determine your success. And just like I said before, don't give up on these loans. Keep going back. If you've got to switch financial institutions, do it. Get second opinions. Find peers that have gone through the same thing, that were told they weren't get a loan and then they got it. Find out how they did it, and really network and work well together to get the answers that hopefully are out there for you.
Congressman, we hear from some concern from business owners about the expanded pandemic unemployment assistance, the extra $600. We in our conversations with obviously this was created in the Senate, and it was a deal brokered between the close Senate majority and the administration, and the logic behind it was we want to make sure everyone is made whole, but there are 50 different unemployment systems, right? They tried, and it would take months, if not years, to update each of those systems to interact with the Department of Labor to make it so you could get your regular rate of pay. Unfortunately, as a result of that, certain individuals may earn more under their pandemic unemployment assistance than they would under their regular work. And that may not always work that well with the Paycheck Protection Program as you try to bring people back on the rolls. Do you have any comments or advice to small business owners who may be kind of going through that process?
Yeah, what you're saying is real, and it's unfortunate. And you kind of nailed it. Maybe you were a little bit more graceful than I would be in that this was how the sausage was made, right? And this is how we got to agreement is we made compromises, and some of those compromises have had side effects. And you're listing one of them on, and that's one of the biggest criticisms I hear is, well, I can make more money unemployed. Really, all we can hope is to appeal to the better side of people. And if you're a small business owner and your employees are telling you, look, I'll make more money if I go on the unemployment rolls, we really have to appeal to the better side of people to say that's not what was intended. Sure, you can get away with that, but I need you here, and the country needs you here back at work. And one of the good things that we've seen through this pandemic is that in many cases, not all, but in many cases, the best side of people is actually coming out, and we're seeing that. And I would appeal, if any of those workers can hear my voice, I would just appeal to them. Look, we need your help. We need you at work. If you can be at work, if your employer is willing to have you at work, that's where we need you to be. And that's your part in helping us out of this pandemic.
And just to tie a bow onto that, Congressman, the Department of Labor recently put out a couple frequently asked questions document, and I'll just quickly highlight two of the questions. One was from the employee's perspective, one was from the employer's perspective, but it was, I was furloughed by my employer, but they have now reopened and asked me to return to my job. Can I remain on unemployment? The answer is no. As a general matter, individuals receiving regular unemployment compensation must act upon any referable to suitable employment and must accept an offer of suitable employment. The second question from the employer's perspective was, one of my workers quit because he said he would prefer to receive the unemployment compensation benefits under the CARES Act. Is he eligible for unemployment? If not, what can I do? No, typically the employee would not be eligible for regular unemployment compensation or the pandemic unemployment assistance. And they said, if desired, employers can contest unemployment insurance claims through their state unemployment insurance agencies process. So just to tie a bow on that conversation.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Okay, so I kind of have one little tidbit of a follow-up on that extra $600. I have a fellow citizen here that I just heard this story the other day, and I still haven't been able to figure out the scenario or the answer for this. This gentleman had to have major surgery on one of his feet several months ago, had to leave employment because it was such a critical surgery. He's divorced, lives at home with an 18-year-old daughter who was going to school for a trade and working at Chuckarama, making $88. Well, her unemployment ended up being $88 a week when she was let go at Chuckarama because they had to close because it's a buffet restaurant. she was given the bonus $600, and you combine the $600 with the 88, and for some reason it triggered the system in Salt Lake to then cancel this gentleman's Medicaid, and he had been able to get onto Medicaid because he's been off work long enough with this surgery from his foot that he couldn't work at all. There was just no way. But it's triggered, and they have now canceled his Medicaid because of her $600 bonus, and they're living in the same household. What do we do for that?
Yeah, there were just enough specifics there that I'd like to get my staff involved with that. And let's offline, if you can give me some details. I think if I'm seeing it right, we've got Jake Bornstein on here, who is my legislative director. That's JB. I don't know if, well, there's two JBs, maybe a JP, I don't know. My eyes aren't good enough. But Bornstein, yeah. If Candace, if you'll get me those details offline, we'll look into that a little bit deeper.
Okay, I appreciate that because that's tough.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Congressman, I think we're at the soft stop time. We really appreciate your willingness to meet with us today and answer these questions. A lot of the questions were very similar, and I believe we've gotten to the gist of most of them. If we get any more additional questions, we'll send them to your staff. Hopefully they can help get us some answers and we can get them back out to our members. But would you like to just give us some closing words?
Thank you. The first thing I would say is let's do this again. I'm available. I would love to take the time with your members in helping them understand the legislation, and probably even more importantly, listening to what they would have me hear, how we can improve. Would love to have their ideas funneled up through you to us. Thank you as small business owners for not just in times of peril like we're in right now, but in day-to-day keeping the wheels of our economy going. There's upwards of 95% of the businesses in my district are small businesses. We are so dependent on your success, and so grateful for, in almost every case, your willingness to mortgage your homes, to work hard, to stay up late, to get up early, to keep those lights on. Thank you for all that you do for our country and for our economy.
Well, thank you, Congressman. We appreciate you. We appreciate your dedication to the state of Utah and the citizens of the state of Utah. We know you keep the entire state in your mind when you're voting. And thank you for your service. Please thank your family for your service and stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank